The man who walked into my courtroom that Monday morning did so with a confidence that seemed almost tangible, a presence that suggested he believed he owned not just the room, but every space he stepped into. Christopher Harrington, a 47-year-old real estate mogul whose net worth was reported by the Providence Business Journal at around $80 million, carried himself like royalty in exile. He was dressed in a custom Italian suit valued at approximately $10,000, a polished ensemble complemented by a Rolex presidential watch that caught the courtroom lights with every slight movement of his hand. His silver hair, meticulously styled, completed the portrait of someone accustomed to influence, affluence, and unquestioned authority. Every element of his appearance screamed power, wealth, and the implicit belief that his fortune could resolve any problem, no matter how serious. But it wasn't his suit, his watch, or even the aura of entitlement that told me what I needed to know. It was his expression, a cold, unyielding irritation. There was no hint of anxiety, no flicker of remorse, not even the ordinary apprehension most defendants feel in the presence of a judge. Instead, Harrington's look said plainly, "I am inconvenienced." Here was a man accustomed to bending the world to his will, now forced to face a situation far beneath his self-assigned station. Behind him followed not one but two attorneys. Marcus Feldman, billing $950 per hour, exuded the calm confidence of someone who thrived on defending the powerful. At his side, an associate carried a mountain of legal documents, so extensive it seemed capable of building a small fortress. Harrington's entourage made the disparity between wealth and everyday life glaringly obvious. Seated in the first row of the gallery, a stark contrast confronted that display of opulence. Rosa Martinez, 34, a housekeeper at the Grand Providence Hotel, appeared small and vulnerable. Her arm was encased in a cast, her face marked by fading bruises, and her eyes reflected a fear familiar to anyone who has suffered at the hands of someone far more powerful. Rosa's presence embodied the courage it takes to confront abuse, even when the world seems unlikely to notice or care. The charges against Christopher Harrington were grave assault and battery, false imprisonment, and witness intimidation. According to the police report, the conflict began when Rosa requested 3 months of unpaid wages. Harrington, instead of resolving the dispute professionally, assaulted her. When Rosa threatened to involve the labor board, Harrington locked her in his wine cellar for 6 hours while he deliberated her fate. The ordeal culminated with an attempt to bribe her with $10,000 to return to Mexico and forget the incident. Rosa, instead of succumbing to intimidation, went to the police. And now, Harrington stood in my courtroom, annoyed that a woman earning $12 per hour had dared to demand accountability. In the next 6 minutes, I was about to do something that would shock everyone present and teach Harrington a lesson that his immense wealth had never afforded him in this courtroom. A fat bank account carried no shield, no exemption from justice. I began reviewing the file. "Mr. Harrington, you are charged with assault and battery against Rosa Martinez, false imprisonment, and witness intimidation. These are serious charges. How do you plead?" Marcus Feldman rose immediately. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty to all charges. We maintain that these allegations are greatly exaggerated by someone seeking financial gain from a wealthy individual. This is clearly a case of opportunism." I gestured for Feldman to sit. Then I turned to Harrington. "Do you wish to speak for yourself?" Christopher Harrington's response dripped with contempt. "Not guilty. This entire situation is absurd. Miss Martinez was dissatisfied with her employment terms, and now she fabricates these accusations to extort money. It is extortion, plain and simple." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Rosa Martinez flinched, her broken arm a visible reminder of what had occurred. "Oh, Mr. Harrington," I said, my voice steady, "you've just accused your accuser of extortion. That is a serious allegation. Do you have any evidence to support it?" Harrington's reply was telling. "Your Honor, the evidence is obvious. She is a housekeeper making minimum wage. I am worth $80 million. She sees an opportunity for a payout. This is America. People sue wealthy individuals all the time hoping for settlements. So your defense," I said, "is that because you are wealthy, any accusation against you must be financially motivated." A hush fell over the courtroom. The contrast between the powerful and the powerless, the rich and the working class, had never been more stark. Christopher Harrington believed his money placed him above the law, that his fortune could intimidate and silence those with less. But Rosa Martinez's courage, her willingness to stand up despite fear and injury, was a reminder that justice does not favor wealth, it favors truth. In that moment, the entire courtroom understood what I intended to demonstrate: that money cannot erase wrongdoing, influence the scales of justice, or shield one from accountability. Harrington had spent a lifetime believing his status granted immunity. That day he would learn that in my courtroom, wealth was meaningless, power was irrelevant, and justice was the ultimate equalizer. "Exactly, Your Honor," Christopher Harrington said, gesturing dismissively toward Rosa Martinez. "People like Miss Martinez, they come to this country looking for opportunities to take advantage of successful people. I gave her a job. I gave her steady work, and this is how she repays me, with false accusations." I set my pen down carefully. In 38 years on the bench I had heard a lot of defenses, but the casual racism and classism in Harrington's statement was breathtaking. I fixed him with a steady gaze. "Mr. Harrington, you said people like Miss Martinez. What exactly did you mean by that?" For a moment he hesitated, realizing his misstep, but instead of correcting himself, he doubled down. "I meant people who come here illegally, who work under the table, who don't pay taxes, people who exploit the system." "Is Miss Martinez here illegally?" I asked sharply. Marcus Feldman, his attorney, shot up immediately. "Your Honor, my client misspoke. Miss Martinez's immigration status is irrelevant to these proceedings." I raised an eyebrow. "Actually, Counselor, it's very relevant, since your client just accused her of being here illegally." "Miss Martinez, are you a United States citizen?" Rosa stood slowly, her voice quiet but steady, carrying the weight of dignity despite the fear etched on her face. "Yes, Your Honor, I was born in Providence. I am a third-generation American. My grandfather served in World War II, and my father was a firefighter in Providence for 30 years. She sat back down, and a hush fell over the courtroom. Every eye turned to Harrington, who suddenly seemed smaller, the weight of his words pressing against him. "Mr. Harrington," I said, "you just accused an American citizen, a woman whose grandfather fought for this country, of being an illegal immigrant attempting to extort you. Would you like to revise your statement?" His face flushed crimson. "Your Honor, I didn't know her background. My point is simply that the accusations are false and motivated by money." "Very well," I said. "Let's examine those accusations." I turned to the prosecutor. "Miss Chen, please present the evidence." Jennifer Chen approached, tablet in hand. "Your Honor, we have multiple pieces of evidence. First, medical records from Marion Hospital confirm that Miss Martinez was treated for a fractured wrist, facial contusions, and bruising consistent with being grabbed and shoved. The attending physician noted the injuries were consistent with assault. She tapped the tablet, and the courtroom monitor illuminated with photos of Rosa's injuries. Swollen and bruised, her wrist bent unnaturally, and finger-shaped bruises marked her upper arms. A collective gasp rippled through the room. "Second," Chen continued, "we have text messages from Mr. Harrington to Miss Martinez." She swiped through the screen. The first message read, "You want your money? Come to the house at 90 Hozard p.m. We'll settle this privately." The second, "If you go to the labor board, you'll regret it. I have lawyers, I have connections, you have nothing." The third, "I'm offering you 10,000 cash. Take it and go back where you came from. Final offer." Harrington's attorney leaned forward, whispering urgently, but Harrington waved him off. "Your Honor, these texts don't prove assault. I was merely trying to resolve a wage dispute. Yes, the threat to involve the labor board angered me, and perhaps I chose poor words, but that does not make me a criminal." "Mr. Harrington," I said, voice rising slightly, "you told her to go back where she came from. She was born here in Providence. Where exactly did you expect her to go?" He did not answer. Chen pressed on. "Your Honor, we also have footage from Mr. Harrington's security system. It shows Miss Martinez arriving at his residence at 90:07 p.m. entering through the service entrance. At 90:23 p.m., Harrington leads her to the basement wine cellar. The door closes behind her and remains shut for 6 hours and 12 minutes. She emerges at 30:47 a.m., clearly distressed, and runs toward the exit. Mr. Harrington does not follow. The footage played, the time-stamped security feed leaving no doubt. The courtroom watched in silence as Harrington escorted Rosa to the basement, closed the heavy door, and left her locked inside for hours. The images were damning. 6 hours trapped in a basement with no one to help, and no recourse but to endure. The evidence was clear, overwhelming, and indisputable. Medical records, photographs, threatening messages, and video footage, all painting a stark portrait of intimidation, abuse, and a blatant attempt to leverage wealth and power to silence a working-class woman. And as the courtroom absorbed the weight of it, the contrast between Christopher Harrington, the man who believed money could shield him from accountability, and Rosa Martinez, the woman who endured pain, fear, and intimidation to stand for her rights, could not have been starker. In that moment, the scales of justice began to tilt unmistakably toward truth. "Your Honor," Jennifer Chen began, her voice calm but firm, "Miss Martinez's testimony is that during those 6 hours, Mr. Harrington came down to the basement twice. The first time he told her he was deciding what to do with her. The second time he offered her $10,000 to forget everything and leave the country." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. When she refused and said she was going to the police, he struck her, fracturing her wrist. I looked directly at Christopher Harrington. "Mr. Harrington," I said, "you just watched security footage from your own home showing you locking Miss Martinez in your wine cellar for over 6 hours. How do you explain that?" Marcus Feldman, his attorney, rose quickly. "Your Honor, we acknowledge that an argument occurred. We acknowledge that it became heated. But any physical contact was accidental. Miss Martinez was free to leave at any time, and my client's offer of compensation was a good faith attempt to resolve a wage dispute." I raised an eyebrow. "Counselor, your client locked her in a basement for 6 hours. In what universe is that considered free to leave at any time? The video clearly shows him locking the door." Harrington's patience snapped. "Your Honor, enough! This is ridiculous. So I locked my housekeeper in my wine cellar for a few hours. It's my house, my property. She refused to leave until I paid her wages. I don't even owe her. I had every right to detain her until we resolved the situation." The courtroom erupted in gasps. Even his own attorney looked as though he wished the floor would swallow him whole. I stood and the room fell silent. Everyone knew that when the judge rises, something significant is about to happen. "Mr. Harrington," I said, voice firm, "did you just admit to falsely imprisoning Miss Martinez?" He froze. "That's not what I meant," he stammered. "You said," I repeated slowly, "I locked my housekeeper in my wine cellar for a few hours. That is false imprisonment. That is a felony." "Your Honor, I was frustrated. I misspoke," he said, his bravado faltering. "What you meant," I said, taking a step closer to the defendant's table, "was exactly what you said. You locked her in your basement because you believed your wealth and your property gave you the right to imprison someone who asked for wages she had earned. Let me tell you something about rights, Mr. Harrington. You have the right to your property. You have the right to your wealth. But you do not have the right to assault people. You do not have the right to imprison them. And you absolutely do not have the right to threaten them into silence." I turned to Rosa Martinez. "Miss Martinez, please approach." She stood slowly, her arm in a cast and her face still bearing visible bruises. Her walk was hesitant but determined. Standing before me, she seemed both small and monumental at the same time. "Miss Martinez," I said softly, "tell me what happened that night in your own words." Her voice was quiet but steady. "Your Honor, I worked for Mr. Harrington for 2 years. I cleaned his house 3 times a week. I was paid $12 an hour in cash, no taxes, no benefits, but I needed the work." She paused, her eyes reflecting exhaustion and courage. 3 months ago, he stopped paying me. Every week I asked for my wages. Every week he said next time. After 12 weeks, he owed me $1,800. I have 3 children. I couldn't wait any longer. I told him that if he didn't pay me, I would report him to the labor board. Her voice trembled slightly as she continued, but she did not break. "That's when he sent those text messages. He told me to come to his house at 9:00 p.m., said we'd settle it privately. I went because I needed that money desperately. My rent was late. My kids needed food." Her words painted the scene in vivid detail. "When I arrived, he was angry. He said I was threatening him, trying to extort him. I told him I just wanted the wages I had earned. He grabbed my arm and pulled me to the basement. He pushed me into the wine cellar and locked the door. I was there for 6 hours. It was dark. I couldn't see. I couldn't get out. Her voice broke slightly, but she continued. I was terrified. I didn't know if he would let me go. I just wanted my children to be safe. And I wanted to get home alive. The courtroom was silent. Every person present felt the weight of her words. The fear, the desperation, the injustice. The evidence, the texts, the footage, the medical records, and now her testimony all corroborated the same truth. Christopher Harrington had abused his power and wealth to intimidate, injure, and imprison a working woman who had simply demanded what was rightfully hers. In that moment, the scales of justice seemed to hang in perfect balance, waiting for accountability to tip them. Harrington's arrogance, his belief that money could shield him, would soon meet the undeniable force of truth. It was cold. Rosa Martinez began, her voice steady despite the visible bruises still marking her face. I didn't know what he was going to do. I thought maybe he'd call ICE even though I'm a citizen. I thought maybe he'd hurt me worse. I was terrified. She paused, gathering her courage. He came down twice. The first time he said he was deciding what to do with me. The second time he offered me 10,000 to take it and go back to Mexico. When I told him I was born here and that I was going to the police, he grabbed my wrist and twisted it. I felt it snap. The pain was so intense, I almost passed out. Tears streamed down her face as she recounted the memory. He told me nobody would believe me over him, that he had money, lawyers, connections. Then he left me there for 2 more hours before he finally unlocked the door. She looked directly at me, her gaze unwavering. Your Honor, I came to this country, my family came to this country 3 generations ago, for opportunity, for justice, for the promise that everyone is equal under the law. Mr. Harrington thinks his money makes him untouchable. Please show him he's wrong. I turned to Christopher Harrington. Mr. Harrington, you heard Miss Martinez's testimony. You saw the medical records. You watched your own security footage. You admitted in this courtroom to locking her in your wine cellar. What do you have to say for yourself? He glanced at his attorney, who shook his head frantically, but Christopher's arrogance wouldn't allow him to remain silent. Your Honor, I'm a job creator. I employ hundreds of people through my real estate ventures. I pay millions in taxes. I've donated to charities, to politicians, to this city's infrastructure. One incident with a disgruntled employee shouldn't define me. I'll pay the fine, whatever it is. Can we just resolve this and move on? I stepped closer. Mr. Harrington, you think this is about a fine? You think you can write a check and make this go away? He waved his hand dismissively. Your Honor, that's how these things work. I'm willing to compensate Miss Martinez for her time and injuries. I'll pay her legal fees. I'll even give her a recommendation for her next position. Let's be practical here. I repeated, my voice firm. Practical. You want to be practical. Here's what's practical, Mr. Harrington. You assaulted an employee. You forcefully imprisoned her for 6 hours. You attempted to bribe her into silence. You threatened her immigration status despite knowing she's a citizen. And you did all of this because you believed your wealth made you immune to consequences. Returning to the bench, I sat and addressed the courtroom. Here's my finding. Based on your own admissions, the security footage from your home, the medical records, and the text messages, I find you guilty of assault and battery, false imprisonment, and witness intimidation. Christopher's face went pale. Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding. I didn't mean to admit. I cut him off. You admitted it in open court. It's on the record. The court reporter captured every word. You cannot take it back now. His attorney rose. Your Honor, I request an immediate recess to consult with my client. His statements were made in the heat of the moment. Denied, I said firmly. Your client made those statements deliberately. He believed his wealth would protect him from consequences. He was wrong. I looked directly at Harrington. Here is your sentence. For assault and battery, 90 days in the adult correctional institutions. For false imprisonment, 1 year to be served consecutively. For witness intimidation, 6 months, also consecutive. Total 2 years in state prison. The courtroom erupted. Christopher's face shifted from pale to red. 2 years for a wage dispute that got out of hand. Mr. Harrington, I said, voice rising over the outburst. This was not a wage dispute. This was a pattern of abuse against a vulnerable worker. You withheld wages. You assaulted her when she asked for what she had earned. You imprisoned her. You tried to bribe her. And you threatened her. Each of those actions is a separate crime. He protested. Your Honor, I have businesses to run. Responsibilities? I can't spend 2 years in prison. You should have thought about that before you locked Miss Martinez in your wine cellar, I said. Officer D'Angelo stepped forward. Harrington looked at him, disbelief written across his face. You're arresting me right now. Yes, Mr. Harrington, Officer D'Angelo said. This is what happens when you're convicted of felonies. Marcus Feldman shot up. Your Honor, I am filing an immediate appeal. I shook my head. An appeal does not erase what happened. It does not change the facts, the testimony, or the law. Justice has been served here today. Take Mr. Harrington into custody. As the officers approached, the weight of the courtroom's silence settled over the room. 2 years. For someone who thought his money, influence, and power could bend the law to his will. That day, the scales of justice had proven that wealth could never excuse abuse. That privilege could never shield cruelty. And that accountability applied to everyone, no exceptions. I'm requesting bail pending appeal, Marcus Feldman said urgently, standing beside his client. This is excessive, I replied firmly. Bail is denied. Mr. Harrington is remanded into custody immediately. He has demonstrated a clear pattern of using his wealth to intimidate and threaten. He is a flight risk with the resources to leave the country. He will remain in custody. Christopher Harrington began to back away from the bailiff, panic flashing across his face. No, this isn't happening, Your Honor. Please, I'll pay whatever fine you want. I'll compensate Miss Martinez.
Name your price.
I shook my head. There is no price, Mr. Harrington. Justice isn't for sale. Officer D'Angelo stepped forward, and the bailiff took Harrington's arm. For a man worth $80 million, he suddenly looked small, powerless, utterly shocked that his wealth could not protect him. This isn't over, he shouted, struggling. I'll appeal this. I'll have you removed from the bench. Do you know who I am? Do you know what kind of influence I have? I rose, my voice cutting through the courtroom. Mr. Harrington, I know exactly who you are. You are a man who believed wealth made him untouchable. You are a man who hurt someone weaker than you and expected to get away with it. Today, you learned that in this courtroom, your bank account means nothing. The doors closed behind him, muffling his protests, and the courtroom exhaled as silence returned. I turned to Rosa Martinez, who approached hesitantly, tears streaming down her face. She stood before me, still trembling but resolute. Miss Martinez, I said, in addition to Mr. Harrington's criminal sentence, I am ordering him to pay you full restitution, the $100,800 in unpaid wages, medical expenses, and compensation for your pain and suffering. The total is $35,000 to be paid immediately from his assets. She nodded, speechless, overwhelmed by relief. I continued, I am referring Mr. Harrington's employment practices to the U.S. Department of Labor for further investigation. If he treated you this way, it's likely he has treated others unfairly. They need to know. I looked out at the gallery, meeting the eyes of everyone present. Let me say this to everyone here. We live in a society where wealth often shields people from consequences, where the powerful can afford expensive attorneys who make problems disappear, and where working people are told that nobody will believe them. But not in this courtroom. Here, Rosa Martinez's broken wrist weighs more heavily than Christopher Harrington's $80 million. Here, the testimony of a housekeeper matters as much as the excuses of a millionaire. Here, everyone is equal under the law. I sat down, letting the words resonate. It wasn't just a slogan, it was a promise. And today that promise had been kept. The courtroom erupted in applause. People stood, some crying, clapping, overwhelmed by the sense of justice served. Rosa Martinez stood there, finally receiving the recognition and justice she deserved. Christopher Harrington had believed he was untouchable. He believed his wealth placed him above the law. He believed he could assault, imprison, and threaten someone with impunity. In seconds, he had been proven wrong. The moment he admitted locking Rosa in his wine cellar, his fate was sealed. No amount of money could save him from the consequences of his actions. 2 years later, I received a letter from him, written from the adult correctional institutions. Dear Judge Caprio, I'm writing this from my cell at the ACI. I have served 14 months of my sentence and have 10 months remaining. Every day is the same. I wake when told, I eat what I'm given, and I follow orders from people I once considered beneath me. I have no power here, no influence. My money means nothing. And I have a lot of time to think about how I got here. I got here because I believed I was untouchable, because I thought wealth made me special, because I saw someone who couldn't fight back and assumed I could do as I pleased. You taught me in seconds what I should have learned decades ago. Money does not place you above the law. Your Honor, I am sorry for what I did to Miss Martinez. I am sorry for my arrogance in your courtroom, and I am sorry it took prison to teach me that every person has dignity and value, regardless of their bank account. When I'm released, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be better. Thank you for stopping me before I hurt anyone else. Respectfully, Christopher Harrington, inmate 392847. I kept that letter not because it excused his behavior, but because it showed the power of accountability. Even the most arrogant, wealth-driven individuals can be transformed when confronted with the truth. That letter was proof that justice does not only punish, it can teach, correct, and ultimately create change. And that is the lesson from this courtroom. Wealth does not equal power over the law, influence does not surpass justice, and every person, regardless of their station, is entitled to dignity, fairness, and protection. Today we upheld that principle.